Arvest Bank is pleased to bring you the Legend Series, where we focus on individuals who are committed to their communities, much like Arvest.
Hello, I'm Mary Ellen Phelan with SBJ Live. Today we're here with Dr. Spence, today's legend. Dr. Spence, you're retired. Your wife may disagree with that. Tell us a little bit about, you're the second longest standing university president in the country. And prior to that, you were a preacher for 20 years with Assemblies of God in Alabama. And following your retirement as president, you were chancellor of Evangel, and this April, you officially retired.
Well, that's a thumbnail.
Yes.
And I am very happily retired at this point, but very thankful for the wonderful experiences I had at Evangel and that I've had in Springfield.
You came to Evangel in 1974. The college at that time, it was a college at that time, correct?
Right.
It was only 20 years old. So you saw it from a young adult, well into its adulthood. And in that time, you saw a great deal of change. And you had to be the one spearheading a lot of those changes, if not all. What would you say was the most significant change in Evangel in those 40 years?
Well, probably, at least in the eyes of the public, of the Springfield public, the most significant change would be the transformation of the campus. Many people in Springfield are not aware of the fact that where Evangel is today, during World War II, was a major Army medical center. Mm-hmm. It was a campus of barracks buildings that had been constructed with the awareness that there was a good possibility that World War would take place. Actually, O'Reilly, the O'Reilly General Hospital was the name of it, was built before World War II broke out. But there was the realization that it was a very, very distinct possibility that there would be war and that the United States would be involved. During its peak operation, which would have been the spring of 1945, there were thousands of wounded servicemen and women who were on that campus being treated. The O'Reilly Hospital was noted as a center for plastic surgery, particularly working with wounded service personnel who had been burned and who had been maimed by explosions. And some people, knowing about the O'Reilly name with it, assume that may have been connected with the O'Reilly family that's very prominent here now. That was not the case. The O'Reilly name that was associated with the hospital was a former Surgeon General back in the early 1900s, and that name was attached to it.
But a lot of people had felt like that campus, those who did know about it, felt like it had a lot of historic significance. And that may have been, in the 90s, one of the greatest challenges you faced, because you officed as the president in a barracks, and
yes.
It wasn't until 1998, I believe, that the final barrack was torn.
2009.
2009.
Yes.
And that was a bit controversial. How did you bridge that?
There were people, of course, who would have liked to have seen the preservation of at least one of the old buildings. Mm-hmm. And I was probably the most vocal about that. However, when we got to the point that we could have selected one of those buildings to preserve, as long as we kept those barracks where they were, used them as they were, everything stayed in compliance with zone and code as they were at the time they were built. But to preserve one of those buildings would have required it being moved, and once it was moved, it had to be brought up to current code in every way. And the cost of preserving one of those buildings and coming up to code was virtually prohibitive. And so we decided we would have to preserve our history with photographs. And we have a a good collection.
Is
good
that
collection
open
of
to
that.
the
Oh,
public?
yes, and that's in the administration building. Just as you come in, the Heritage Room was renamed in honor of my wife because of her work at the university. But to get back to your question, probably as people in Springfield would look at Evangel, they would think the most significant change was the transformation of the campus. Replacing the barracks that had served us well with permanent buildings and buildings that would serve our current students and future students. So if someone were to ask what's the most significant change, I would say the transformation of the campus.
But the transformation of the campus was made necessary by the growth in student
The
population,
growth and
the
development,
expansion of your
yes.
programs. But a lot of people might argue that your greatest contribution was your fundraising ability.
Like the individuals highlighted in the Legend series, Arvest Bank is committed to our community. Click on the link below to find out ways that you can engage with us to help make Springfield great.